Hi, I'm Eric Mieni, and this is Breaking New Ground, a brand new show that takes a look at local housing. Please join me on this journey that will take us across the country over the next 24 episodes. Did you know that since 1994, South Africa has built more than 2.3 million homes for the poor? And yet, even though some of us have these RDP houses that are nice and comfortable, there are millions of people still living in shacks, and you might still be stuck in a two-room. This program will look at the reasons why. To know where you are going, you need to understand where you are from. And the history of apartheid spatial planning, which is at the root of our housing problems, starts here at the foot of Table Mountain. We all know that when the National Party came to power in 1948, they passed laws to stop black people from moving into cities. They wanted the Bantus, as they called us, to stay in the Bantustans or homelands. So we needed what they called a Section 10 permit to stay and work in cities. Laws were passed that allowed them to move entire communities from the places where they lived and dump them in some place far away.
So the spatial map that you like is, first of all, we're keeping the good areas up the mountain for whites, and we're keeping the sea views for whites. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with this very delicate aquifer area, which we all know is not supposed to have people on it.
Space, or where you lived, was determined by your skin color. Jobs were in or near the white areas, which meant most black people had to travel long distances to get to work. But the Bantustan idea didn't work, and so rural people were forced to come to the towns and cities under difficult conditions to look for jobs. Getting there was only the first step in a long and hard journey, which would see people moving often, blown around like litter. Langa in Cape Town is a perfect example of how the National Party used space and urban planning to reinforce apartheid. It's one of the oldest townships in the country, cut off from the nearby white and colored townships by high fences, railway lines, sewage systems, and highways.
It was about separation and segregating. Big roads separating people so that you don't have communication. Cordoned off possible areas. It's run like a military thing if you just look at the way things are laid out. And if you look at Khayelitsha and places like this, I mean, you literally can put a cordon sanitaire around it. And this is all part of P.W. Botha's part of his nuttiness that took place in the 80s. It was Huntington's reform repression model. You do your reformation, tricamerals and all of this, and you repress the hell out of people. What does it do also? It makes people hostile to each other. You have no contact with people who are white or African or whatever it is. They're the other. And if they get something that you're not getting, you're angry about it. And if they come into your area, you're angry about it.
Like most black people coming to Cape Town looking for work, Ma Valencia Nqwete's journey started in the villages of the Eastern Cape. She arrived in Gugulethu Township in 1965. No ID and no Section 10 permit. The only place where she could stay in was in the backyard of her sister. It was the first stop in a journey that would take her all over Cape Town, from the rich white suburbs in the City Bowl to the barren flatlands of Khayelitsha, crisscrossing the Cape in search for survival.
This place, it was my room. I was staying with my sister's backyard. I couldn't believe it. That in the winter time it's cold, but in the summer it's very hot.
They were staying here, but when she moved with her cousins, I let it off, pull it down.
The time I was in Cape Town, I'm staying in Heiderveld in Gugulethu. I take the train in a Heiderveld station, and from 5 o'clock when I take the train there, I'll be in a down station about after 6. From there, I haven't got money to take the taxi. I just walked from all that way to Orange. And I'm supposed to be there at work about 7:30.
It was a constant cat and mouse game with the police who were always on the lookout for natives, as they called us, working without permits.
This is the house I was working as a domestic worker about 4 or 5 years, but at night I was making a babysit. The time I was working here in Orange, I can't travel when I like to go because I was scared for the buses. I must go in a weekend. In a weekend they didn't catch us, but during the week when we come at work and when we go out in the shops, they catch us. And I couldn't move. If I want to move during the week, I couldn't move at all. It was too terrible for me because, when I'm sitting here, I was just thinking about my children in a location. Sometimes, I'm eating very nice and they got no food. And I can't walk around to look at them because I was got a pass for this man. He said I mustn't make up and down for my children. He make a pass for working in his house. My heart was so shocked. Couldn't believe it. It was working very hard in work.
Manwete eventually managed to build a shack of her own at a squatter camp called Crossroads and moved their children there.
This side, it was a crossroad, and they're fighting with us. I don't know why. I was staying here in KTC, special that 3, I don't know, somewhere near my house. I'm staying here about 4 years, but it was too dangerous, especially at night. When it bent down, the KTC, my heart was very sore because that time I was at work in Orange. From the Orange, I take the bus, I take the taxi. From here, when I come here, there's no house. And I don't know where's my children. My heart was very sore. I couldn't stand, I was looking all over. But the people, they said, no, the children is safe. There was the hostel somewhere here, and then I find my children there.
With no place to go, she turned to a church and moved into an empty garage at the back of a pastor's home in Langa.
This is my house. I was staying after the time I was banned in KTC.
Manwete's housing journey took her back to Khayelitsha, where she was able to buy a piece of land for 800 rand.
When I first to come in Khayelitsha, and it was very, very bad. I couldn't believe it. When you come at night, you can't find your house because the houses is too close together. It was too terrible. Even when you wash your dishes, you couldn't throw the water outside because it's too close together. And it was dangerous.
In 1992, after nearly 25 years in Cape Town, she finally received a 4-room council house in Khayelitsha. After more than 2 decades of wandering, at last she had a place she could call home. Welcome back to Breaking New Ground, the show that's dedicated to the importance of having a roof over your head, a place you can call home. You'll have seen in the insert that our past, and apartheid in particular, shaped our lives and shapes the places we live in. That might be in the past though, but how does that legacy impact on us today? Is it by accident, for instance, that it's almost always windy in Langa and generally never so in Camps Bay? Langa has a tradition of discussion, debate, and democracy that started long before 1994. Many political fights were resolved here. But thankfully, the back rooms of hostels and shacks where this was done have made way to community centers like this, where we've come to discuss apartheid spatial planning and how it impacts on us ordinary citizens today. With me are, from the right, Professor Dan Smith, who is the advisor to the National Ministry of Housing. We have Olivia van Rooyen from GUIASA, which is an NGO that specializes in housing microfinance. We have Umamu Nwete, whose housing story I'm sure is an inspiration to many, and her daughter Zolega. Welcome. We also have Shanaz Majid, who heads the Department of Local Government and Housing in the Western Cape. Welcome. Let me start with you, Professor Smith. On the basics, what is spatial planning?
What spatial planning has to do with is, particularly in bigger towns and cities, it becomes necessary to organize the way in which we actually go about dealing with the process of living our lives. So, for example, in our towns and cities, as they grow and as people come in, usually to get work, you have people have got to go to work, people have to live somewhere, people have got to be able to get between where they live and where they work. And as places become bigger, so it becomes necessary to actually have a plan.
Excellent. Now, there is such a thing as apartheid spatial planning. I mean, that's a general way of planning space for people. But what was unique about apartheid spatial planning?
After 1948, the then Nationalist Party went out of its way to actually organize the way we live our lives in a way which was structured around the ideology of apartheid. What you had is a situation where most black people were located at large distances from the center of the city. And in fact, this idea of trying to create spaces where people could live and go back to work and back to their residential places became an excuse to allow people, or to allow the government of the time, to take people away from where they were currently living. So you would have some people, so District 6 in Cape Town would be a good example. Cato Manor in Durban would be another good example.
Sophia Town in Johannesburg.
Sophia Town in Johannesburg. Now, these were people that were then living in a slice of the cake which didn't fit the plan. So they were then moved from where they were and relocated.
Okay. Now, Shanaz, maybe from a government perspective, you can give us an idea of how this impacts on housing plans, if you like. If you have apartheid spatial planning and you're now having to have normal spatial planning.
If you look the way the city is designed, the way where the rail tracks are, it divides people very distinctly. It's about who lives closest to the city center, as Professor Smith have mentioned. And our job is to undo that systematically. It's going to take time. It's going to take significant resources. But we have serious and a formidable policy position to help shift that. The main focus was around let's build as many houses for as many people in need as possible, and that's a good thing. That's what every government must do. However, it's where we've built those houses. That's the main limitation. And at times also in our speed with reaching the greatest number of poor people, there has been poor management of the quality of houses, where some contractors have not done the best job possible. So now we are saying, going forward, it's important for government to ensure that we go for both quantity and quality. We cannot compromise one or the other, because our housing demand and the housing shortage is still formidable to keep pace with our urbanization and our level of growth and the backlog in terms of need that need to be positively responded to.
Okay, which will bring a lot of the disenfranchised or previously disenfranchised closer to the city,
Absolutely.
Closer to the economic sectors and all of this stuff.
Indeed.
Olivia, how does an organization like yours, GUIASA, the NGO, fit into this picture of trying to provide housing?
The GUIASA Fund is a housing microfinance organization that works with communities, help people to form savings groups, so people save within groups, and then people take small and micro loans to add to their subsidy, their savings, and then their loan to build a bigger house. So typically, through the subsidy system, before people lived in a 23 square meter or 30 square meter house through the subsidy systems, our clients would, through their savings and loan, build a bigger house and live in a 60 square meter house. And no matter where people live, people must have the opportunity to, on an ongoing basis, invest in their housing and in their living conditions so as to, for people to invest themselves in where they are and so as to improve the conditions under which people are living.
Mamwet, now your story I find quite inspirational. How do you feel?
Ndisithanda kakhulu ngoba ke ugovernment at least usinikile ezazindlu zincinci kodwa xa ke ngoku uye wafumana imali ukwazi ke ngoku ukuya sakuncede senze ne-saving ukwazi ke ngoku uba at least uzenzele indlu enkulu. Ndiyavuya kakhulu yiloo nto.
But now you get to a housing space. What do you think is the most positive impact of that?
I think it's a very positive impact because living in a shack, it's quite, you don't feel comfortable because the shack can burn anytime. Can't even concentrate properly, whatever you do in a shack. It's like, it doesn't give you time to relax as well.
It's time for a quick ad break. We will wrap up when we return.
Stay with us. When we return, we'll show you how Manwete was able to build her dream home and help her community at the same time. In 2000, Manwete used her own savings, combined with a loan from the Guyasa Fund, a building microfinance organization, to extend her home and turn it into a double-story house. She ran out of money and received funds from the Department of Housing to finish it. In 2004, she converted part of the house into a creche for her community and now earns valuable income from it.
The time I come here, I bought this plot with 800 grand. I'm staying about 4 years in that plot. And the council houses, the government just built the council houses. After that council houses, my daughter, we just prepared, we must make the house bigger. And so, the PSA fund, he just give me the money and the saving as well. After all these years, I've been struggling. And I've got a beautiful house now. It's not that for me and my daughter. I'm just helping the other people, like the community, the mothers, they just bring the daughter every day. I just help them. And I'm working about 3 people. They're helping me.
Her 4-room government house has become an asset to her and her family, one that will benefit them for generations to come.
Zolega, I mean, we've heard your mother's story. Amazing. She's where she is now. But how, if in any way it has this impacted on the future for you?
Okay, what I'll do is we've tried, because it was both of us, trying to build ourselves a nice place to stay in, spacious. For me, yes, I'd stay in the house until I get married, probably. Then from there, obviously, I would have to move to my own space, okay? Meaning that probably the suburbs, okay? But not forgetting where I come from, because that will be my home, and for my mother, and for whoever else is living there or working there in the meantime. So I think that was a start for us, and I will never forget that, because we come from nothing to something, which is very nice, and all of that, we trust in God as well. Through hardships as well, I might say. It was very tough, but we managed to succeed.
So now you can contribute back in a way.
Yes.
One of the things that they would say, Shanaz, around the problems going forward, right, is you might want to bring people to the center, but the land costs too much. You might want to do this. You can't move the railway tracks. They still divide people, but to move that infrastructure is a problem. Way forward. What are you guys looking to do? How do you go over those boulders, if you like?
We are busy for the past 4 years with some very exciting initiatives. In the last 18 months, we have mobilized with the banks, with the private sector, just under R500 million worth of private investment in partnership with government using our state-owned land. We are using unused buildings or buildings that's no longer used for the same purpose it originally was planned. For example, old buildings from the Department of Health, old facilities in Woodstock, in Rosebank, along is part of the entrance into the CPD, and transforming that for social housing, making apartments, much more affordable, looking at cross-subsidization of that. We are also taking a bold new action around buying up expensive land within strategic places. We are also doing land swaps as part of the range of innovations that we want to bring to how we use state land. Also, having now rationalized what provincial government administer, what land national government administer, and what land municipalities have available, because in the recent past, we haven't had a good handle on knowing exactly which pieces of land we'd want to strategically deploy. We have now successfully, as a provincial government, put a stop to the tendency that have happened over this past decade of municipalities wanting to build golf courses, right, and using a prime property that's not serving the best interests of government's policy agenda.
With all its environmental impacts that are not that positive.
And being a water scarce, region that we are in.
But let me hold you. You advising national government. How much of this is being replicated across the 9 provinces? Is it like
on the one hand, we're saying we've got a challenge, and that is we've got to provide housing for people. On the other hand, we've actually now got to go that extra step. We've got to provide housing for people in environments which help to enhance their lives. It's no good being stuck out in the edge of nowhere. You may have a house, but in fact, it costs you your whole month's salary to get anywhere.
To get the whole month's salary?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we have to think. We've got to go that extra step. We can't. We're delivering lots of houses, but we're actually reproducing the kind of structure that we've had in our cities.
You talk about working within the community. One of the things that I've always asked myself is, when shack dwellers move into a shack area, is it normally the most convenient for them to access the facilities they need to live? For instance, when you help them build where they are you actually helping them build in the best possible place for that?
I think that most of our work is within the RDP, post-RDP construction environment. So yes, we are helping people improve where they are, but our philosophy is also partially that on the one hand, the policy shift to look at better located pieces of land is fairly recent, but the reality is we've got 2.4 million units in not so desirable locations, and the question is, what are we going to do about adding value where people are already?
Okay.
Obviously, it's much easier adding value in an environment where the piece of land was in a better location in the first place and so on. But Delft exists, so what are we going to do about making Delft a better place? Khayelitsha exists, what are we going to do about making Khayelitsha a better place? And so that challenge still remains. We can take the lessons from the past out now and do things better into the future, but with what we've got, how do we improve that?
Professor Smith, thanks for coming through.
Thanks.
Olivia, Mamweta.
Thank you.
Shanaz, thanks for coming through to the show. Spatial planning from the apartheid era did create some major problems in terms of us being able to meet our housing demands. But there are some amazing stories out there, very inspirational. Do write to us and share them if you want to. And don't forget to tune in again next week when we look at how cities are coping with the huge numbers of people leaving the rural areas for a better life. I'm Eric Mieni, and this has been Breaking New Ground.
Oh,